School of Democracy and Socialism Forum, which is a platform to promote an understanding of dynamics of society with quest for freedom, justice, equality, and fraternity. It focuses on knowledge and dialogue among concerned persons. We invite people like David H. Albert, who has a lived Gandhian life and who dedicated his life for the service of Gandhian goals, that is sustainable development goals and democracy, justice, and sustainable oriented life of society. Let me give a brief introduction to David H. Albert, who is with us as a main speaker of today's session. Uh, 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 he's a man with conviction who dedicated his life for the Gandhian path, Gandhian values, and Gandhian constructive program. He holds degree from William College, Oxford University, and committee on social thought at the University of Chicago. But he gave us a promising academic career to become a student of Gandhi. And I'm just sharing his a brief bio in the chat box so that we can save some time, and you are requested to read his bio. We have with us as a chair of today's session, Dr. Suresh ji. Suresh ji is a deep seeker of environmental insights. He holds doctorate from Queen University, and he has been a Fulbright research scholar at UC Berkeley, USA. Uh, and he has over 25 years of experience gained from working in development sectors. He has been a part of government organizations, NGOs, and global think tank. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. So we will begin today's session with a introductory remark of respected chair. So Dr. Suresh ji, please help us to start the discussion on the very
Thank you,
topic,
Randhir.
global challenges of water.
Thank you, Randhir, for the kind words and the introduction to me and to today's key speaker, David Albert. It's my privilege and honor to be here. And Randhir, is it okay I talk in English or you want in Hindi? I'm comfortable with all because. Randhir? Okay, I'll continue in English. I'm not getting a response from Randhir. I'll continue in English, but if anybody has any issues, then let me know. I'm able to speak in Hindi as well. My association with some of the water sector challenges and issues goes back to 25 plus years. However, I'm sure that in this audience there are many more people who know much more about about these issues and challenges. But yes, I started my career at Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage as one of the directors at a very early age, where I had met Anupam Mishra ji and Rajendra Bhai, who are dear friends, and I have followed their work. And some of the good friendships and understandings about the work has maybe led to me being invited to chair this today's forum. I was excited to hear from Randhir when he reached out to me. I told him that I'm not anymore in India, but I have moved on due to some personal and professional reasons. I work with International Water Association, which is a membership-based organization of global. It has 140 countries, 8,000 members who are there, who are actively engaged to find solutions on the global challenges. And the Sustainable Development Agenda 6 is the core around which our activities are geared up. And I should admit this thing that IWA, with my coming in, we are trying to achieve that it should be more balanced and equitable representation of issues, challenges, as well as solutions, such that we could leapfrog to the solutions what matter to the global south, where 80% of the water and sanitation challenges exist. Because as on date, we find that still 2 billion plus people lack access to water and sanitation services. And after almost 50 years, you can say 47 years, the global community came together in New York very recently, and they started discussing again. And usually these kind of meetings have deliberations for a week or 2 weeks. However, the water only got dedicated space for 3 days. And it ended up with some 700 plus commitments without any, you can say, legal backing for these commitments, but they are more for sort of pledges. However, I believe with my these first remarks, I would say these actions as well as the local actions, which basically I believe David will talk today and many other people who are attending this, the local processes and local actions need to feed into the global processes and dialogues. If we really want to achieve if we really want to accelerate the progress towards SDG goals, then that's the only way. Otherwise, after another 5 years or 10 years, we'll be meeting and we will be saying another few billion people are still lacking access to water and sanitation services. It is a complex subject. It is a very, very complex subject, but I believe the insights what Dr. Professor David Albert would today provide would be insightful and to guide us in this. So I would take, without taking much time, because today's our champion and speaker and the keynote speaker is Professor David Albert. So Professor David Albert, I don't know whether as a chair I should be introducing you, or Randhir, would you like to take over from me?
Thank you. We have already introduced him, and because his introduction needs a lot of time. So
long life.
Yes, long life.
I would like to say, don't call me chair for this session. I am just one of the learners, I think, with all of you. I would like to learn from David's work and other people. Looking forward to interactive discussion.
Thank you so much, sir. So humble. David Albert ji, I request you to please start your presentation.
Namaskar, assalamu alaikum, wanakam, swagata, wanakam sami, jai bim. Thank you for having me. I will have a PowerPoint which will go up shortly, and we'll work from that. Thank you for the introduction. And here comes the screen, I think. Okay. So if you get rid of the slides on the left, you can make this larger. There we go. Oh, that's the end. That's the last slide. Can we go to the first slide? There we go. Okay. So thank you. My theme for today is think locally, act globally. You'll see the reverse of what you usually say. 40 years ago, I would have reversed it. Now, I think we have to always be thinking about ways to act globally. The issues we are dealing with are large and complex, and they must be approached in a large and complex way. And I just have a little tiny piece of the puzzle. Next slide. So our mission, we train and equip communities in sustainable village scale technologies to safeguard, conserve, and expand essential resources. Our vision is people able to live healthy lives and free to plan for the future. The most important word there is plan. Most people live their lives almost day for day. They have to figure out where they're going to get their water for that particular day. They deal with waterborne illnesses, they deal with drought, they deal with floods. The idea of making it possible for people to plan is in itself a revolutionary idea. Next slide, please. We are experts in village scale technologies. We build knowledge and resilience. We activate community engagement. We embrace the dignity, strengths, and rights of all living beings, and we stand with the most vulnerable. Next slide, please. So who do we work with? Well, we work with everyone, but our priority populations are Gandhi's last man and last woman. Widows, people with HIV, former child soldiers, tribal communities and Dalits, people with albinism, survivors of wartime rape and sexual violence, orphans and survivors of genocide, unemployed youth, refugees, differently abled people. These are our priority populations. And so I took this picture in 2013. It's from Uganda, Western Uganda. And this boy, 8 years old, was taken out of school by his parents. His parents both had AIDS. They could no longer walk for water. And 3 times a day, this boy would walk 4 kilometers to this pond. This was the best water in his community, to bring water back to his home. This was his life. Next slide. Same story. This one's in Kenya. Again, kids walking for water. That was the best water they had. Next slide. I took this picture in Jinja, Uganda. This is school recess. At recess, every day from school, the kids leave school to go to this muddy stream to gather water so that when they go home from school, they'll be able to take water home. This was the only water they had. And again, I could do this picture in India, but you kind of get the picture from those 3. Next slide. Now I'm moving to Tanzania for a minute. This is my friend Wakame. This is her house. She would normally have a relatively happy life, except, next slide. She's among the Maasai people, a very proud pastoralist people living in Kenya and in the Masai Mara in Tanzania. These are the women. Next slide. As I said, they're pastoralists. They keep cows. In fact, even in their constitution, everything is defined in terms of cows. Next slide. But they have a problem. Because of what's been going on with global climate change, well, to start with, the land is dry, and these women walk with 9 hours a day to get water. They will leave at 3 a.m., leaving usually with their 8 and 9-year-old girls. They will walk for 9 hours and bring their water back by noon. And in the rest of the day, the 13 hours, they take care of their family, they cook, they prepare the kids for school, they deal with their husbands, et cetera, but they were walking 9 hours a day. Next slide. Overnight, they have younger kids too. So they leave their kids, their younger kids in these pens, usually about 40 kids in each of them, usually taken care of by an elderly man. But there'll be 40 kids in the pen so that the women can walk for water. Next slide. Here are the women picking up the water. Next slide. Problem is, it's gotten worse. Because of climate change, many of the women are now leaving at 11 p.m., walking for 13 hours every single day to get water. They'll be back by noon. This is their life. If they are sick that day, if a child is sick, if something else happened, they have no water that day. And when they get to water, this is what their water looks like. This is their drinking water. Next slide. more pictures of what the water looks like. Go ahead. This is drinking water. Whoops, back up. Okay. This is what their drinking water looks like. This is the only water they have in their community. Next slide. Climate change has gotten so bad that roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of their cattle have died in the last 4 years. And remember, all their wealth is tied up in their cattle. I have 50 pictures of dead cows. I figure this is an Indian audience. I did not need to show you 50 pictures of dead cows, so I only show you one. But the cattle have died. The wealth of the people has disappeared, leaving them with virtually nothing. Next slide. So what is happening with climate change? I'm going to do this as simply as I can. These are broad strokes. There's less rain, that's true, but just as important, there are more concentrated rainy seasons. So you get the same amount of rain, but you get all of it in a shorter period of time, resulting in floods. Those of you in India, you know this story. You have, at the same time, you have longer dry seasons. You have lower water table. Wells are no longer effective. My friends in northern Karnataka are digging 1,500 feet down, bringing up water filled with fluoride, which is destroying their bodies, and the wells are drying up. And the rivers, streams, ponds, and lakes are drying up as well. Next slide. Next slide, please. What are the impacts of climate change? Well, first one, as I've already noted, there are longer walks for water. And the result of that is the destruction of family and community life. And in some communities, you have forced migration. I know in northern India, we're beginning to see that. Their entire villages are closing up shop and moving to the outskirts of cities. Girls are being taken out of school. There are more waterborne illnesses as the bacteria, viruses, and parasites are more concentrated in smaller water bodies. There's deforestation. Building materials become more scarce. Cooking fires become more difficult. There's less fodder for cattle. As I said, as many as 3/4 of the cattle have died. And finally, as the walks for water have gotten longer, there are increased rapes and sexual assaults of women and children who are walking for water. So I put up this chart. I go to India and I hear all this talk about sustainable development. And I have to tell you, I'm not in the least bit interested in sustainable development. I'm interested in human rights. The things that you see on this chart are human rights. When you say sustainable development, you mean it's far off in the long-term future, has something to do with national planning. Not interested. The development is a myth. These are human rights. These are the things that a village needs to be able to ensure for itself to basically move toward Gandhian Gram Swaraj. Water security, sustainable food, safe cooking methods, clean water, better building methods, good hygiene, improved sanitation. These are human rights. I don't want to talk about it in terms of development. Next slide. So I'm not going to talk about all of these today. I just want to note that we have these very, very simple technologies that can be employed in villages. When we adopt this technology, there's so many technologies out there. India is a land filled with technologies. I ask, can you build it in the village? Can you maintain it in the village? Can you repair it in the village? Does it require external inputs from other places, or can you do it right where you are? That's how I judge technologies. Lots of the technologies that get sent to me, they work. Work meaning they can do the work that they're supposed to do. My question is whether you can do them in order to build Gram Swaraj. So I'm not going to talk about all of these technologies. I'm going to talk about a few and see how it leads to my major message. Next slide. So our process. I've been working on community move toward Gram Swaraj for almost 50 years. I actually started with Krishnamal Jagannathan in Tamil Nadu in 1977, working on land reform. So this is what we have found over time. The most important part of what we do is community engagement, not the technologies. Community everyone brings something to the process. When we hold a community engagement, we'll bring the entire community together. And we will tell people, you come to our meeting, you have to leave your politics at the door. You have to leave your religion at the door. If you're a panchayat president, you're not a panchayat president. You're just one other person when you come to this meeting. There's no caste in our meeting. Sorry, if that's important to you, please don't come. And we do what a process called appreciative inquiry. Everyone brings something to the process. We also tell people, don't tell us what you need. In fact, we will have found that out through community surveys earlier. Tell us what you bring to the table and can do. The leadership will be collectively chosen and the management as well. The community will choose which technologies they wish to prioritize. You know, we're not just going to fly in and drop things on communities. Each community for each technology will have a sustainability plan. In some African languages, there's no word for maintenance or sustainability. We expect to be in every community in which we work for 3 to 5 years. We monitor, we evaluate, and we follow up, and we have many celebrations. Next slide. And a question that I have been asking myself for 50 years, it's part of my work. What is the right relation between organizations and people from the global north and those they seek to partner with? I have dealt with this question virtually every single week for the past more than 45 years. And I don't know the answer to that question, but I know it's a question that always has to be asked. Next slide. As I said, this is what our process looks like. We do an epidemiological survey, we do a community survey, but the most important thing is we're trying to identify community assets, leadership, and untapped potential. Next slide. So here's the end of a community engagement in the little village of Matsaha in northern Kenya. 175 people came to this for 3 days in a 5-day period. This community, the average income is about $1.50 a day. And when we came to this community, we invited the village chief, who said he'd probably be there for 15 minutes. He stayed for 3 days. And the main reason he stayed, he said to us, when most organizations come here, they don't ask us what we need. They tell us what they've got, they drop it and they leave. You are the first group who, in 17 years that he's been chief, the first people who actually asked the village what they needed and how they would go about attaining it. Next slide. So I want to talk about this technology. You'll see why I worked on this one first as we go through the slideshow. So we teach people to build better, and we do that through something called interlocking stabilized soil bricks. Now, you know the problems with bricks in India. I'll show you a picture in a minute. The current bricks that are being used are inconsistent in size and strength. There's a huge cost for mortar and cement. The bricks are transported long distances, fueling pollution. Bricks are fired utilizing increasingly scarce wood resources, leading to desertification. There's a lack of semi-skilled employment opportunities. And I've seen this in India, traditional brick kilns operate on slavery and near slavery. Next slide. Picture from Tamil Nadu. This is what a traditional brick burning pit looks like. You cut down very scarce trees and wood resources, and you fire the bricks for 3 days, and you get some burned bricks, and you get some good bricks, and you get lots of broken bricks, lots of unusable bricks, and then you have to begin to transport them. And it's all done in Tamil Nadu, as I saw, with slave or near slave labor. Next slide. There's a solution. These are Maasai women, and they're using this very simple machine to make bricks, non-fired bricks. And they use what's called moram, which is the soil underneath the topsoil. You go under the topsoil, you get muram, you use a very small amount of cement, a very small amount of sand, and a very small amount of water. Next slide. And this is what the bricks look like. And these bricks fit together like Legos. If you know what Legos are, a child's toy. But basically, the way they work is you don't need any mortar. You don't need cement between the bricks, which is a tremendous savings. And you've made them on the site of where you're working. Next slide. So this is in Zambia. A community in Zambia, 2 hours from the main road, said, we need a school. Oh, okay, so what's this about the school? Well, they have twice a week, 50 kids meet under an avocado tree for a couple of hours, and that has been their school. And they've asked the government for school, and the government says, we don't have any money for a school, and we can't send you any school teachers unless you have houses for the school teachers. And so this group came to us and said, we need a school, and we looked at them and we said, we don't build schools, but we teach you to build a school. Next slide. So they made those interlocking bricks. Training the masons took about 1 week. They started building their school. Next slide. Building away. Next slide. This is the finished school. It took 5 months. They built it themselves. The school now, they also built 2 houses for school teachers. They have 450 children in the school. They also use it as their community center, and they did it themselves. We didn't have to do it for them. Next slide. There was no government involved in that whatsoever. No large aid agency. There were some Quakers in Wales and Great Britain that provided some of the funding, but people did it themselves. This is our headquarters in Uganda. Lidwin, who I see is on this call, has visited it. Again, you see this very wonderful looking building. You'll notice there's very little mortar between the bricks. This is all made with sustainable bricks, none of them fired. Next slide. People said, we need latrines. We said, well, we don't build latrines. You build latrines. And they used the interlocking bricks, and they began to build the latrines for themselves. Next slide. The obvious question, what does this have to do with water? Next slide. So the problem we want to solve, the long walk for water, massive numbers of women's hours spent retrieving water. I figured out if a woman just spends 2 hours a day retrieving water, that will be 20,000 hours over a 10-year period. Just imagine what a woman could be doing with all of that extra time. She could be reading a book. She could be building a business. She could be taking care of her family. She could become a famous painter. She could, whatever she chooses to do. Children and girls are taken out of school. As I noted, there are rapes and sexual assaults. Children leave school during part of the day to retrieve water. Parents in Africa spend so much money to send their kids to school, and then you say, well, twice a week you have to leave school for 4 hours to go get water. There's no water or sanitation at schools. There's no water to wash with before meals or after latrine use. And groundwater, borehole water is contaminated. Next slide. These are girls at a school in northern Kenya. They're lined up because they're going to go walk for water for the next 2 hours instead of being in class. This is what they're going to be doing. Next slide. If you make straight bricks, you can make curved bricks. And we'll see that use in a minute. Next slide. So here they are making bricks again. Now this picture is somewhat misleading because I have to tell you, of the 3 programs we have in Kenya, they're all headed by widows. So we do have the men working on the bricks here, but it's often women's work as well. But here they are working with the machine. They can make 400 to 500 bricks a day. It requires no electricity. The machines are easily transported. They can be moved from place to place. It's an appropriate technology for their condition. Next slide. We teach people to build 25,000 liter rainwater catchment system with these interlocking bricks. You can see there's virtually no mortar between the bricks. The inside will be coated with hydrolyzed cement, the outside with cement as well. We paint them various colors, but this is essentially what we're building, what we're teaching people to build. Next slide. Here they are at a school, putting in the foundation for what will be their rainwater catchment system. Next slide. And here they are building away. Next slide. Here's a picture of a finished one. The head of our Africa programs, Eric Lajodi, is standing in blue on the top, threatening to jump down on the kids. The kids are saying, no, no, no. 25,000 liters of water. It will refill during the rainy season. It's connected by gutters to the school. The water will be collected, and as they use it, it'll be refilled again in the rains. Each school gets either usually 2 or 3. We've built 60, and I say we, the people there have built 60 of them in the past year, just in this very small area in Kenya. Next slide. Here's some pictures of kids by a rainwater catchment system. Next slide. I want to tell you the story of Mitchell. Mitchell is the class president of her primary school. And she was very proud, and her parents were very proud that she was made class president. And then she discovered that part of her job was identifying the children who would have to go to walk for water every single day. And she complained that after a month, she had no friends. Nope, go back one. She still had no friends. Nope, go back one. Wrong slide. Go back, okay. Her parents began to lose friends as well. And she said when they got the rainwater catchment system, all of a sudden she got friends back. To her, that was a very great difference in her life. Even though you might think of that as a minor difference, this is a major difference attached to the availability of water. Next slide. Next slide. So this is in Rajasthan. I went to Rajasthan in 2011. So Rajasthan, you all know, this is in the middle of the Thar Desert. They get 8 to 14 inches of rain a year. And so over the last 1,000 years, the people of Rajasthan have developed methods of storing water. Again, the water only comes in a 3-week period. They have to store enough water for the whole year. And here they are building essentially an underwater tanka. a semi-underwater tanka. They contour the land, the water flows into the tank. I was brought in because problem was is the water in the tank became bacterial soup. So I had to teach them methods of cleaning the water once they had already captured it. But it's a very, very excellent technology invented in Rajasthan. Next slide. So I asked the question, if your country is becoming a desert, and the way I see it, India is fast becoming a desert, you have to learn from the desert people. So I asked four of our folks, including Lidwin, who's in this call, who you see on the right, Ajmat Khan from Umaria in Madhya Pradesh, two others to come, and to learn the techniques of building tankas. The idea being, if they build tankas in Rajasthan, they could build tankas in Umaria with the tribal people, with the Gond and Baiga people who are suffering from lack of water. We're also looking at the possibility of hybrid technologies. Again, these go in the ground and you need lots of large stones to line the tanka. We said, well, what if you used interlocking bricks, hydrolyzed interlocking bricks? You could make the tankas larger. You wouldn't have to go gather up all the stones around you. You could produce employment in the local community and you could have better tankas. So that's just an idea we're playing with. Next slide. Next slide. So I went to visit the Baiga people near Umaria in Madhya Pradesh in February. These are very proud and wonderful people. You will know more about Baiga people than I do, although I actually know a lot at this point. We were at this meeting. We'd actually gone to this meeting for a specific purpose. I had organized with my Indian friends something called COVID Peace Volunteers that worked with people with COVID all over India during the COVID emergencies. And there was this one woman in this, it's a very remote village, this one woman who'd organized a community kitchen for everyone. They didn't have much food and COVID was making it more difficult. So they pooled their resources and operated a community kitchen for 2 years. And I came to give this woman an award. Next slide, please. Here we were at the meeting with the Baiga people in this village. Next slide. And the woman's name is Bismat Baiga. And you'll notice the purple umbrella. We use this purple umbrella as a symbol. The purple umbrella covers all. And that's the symbol of the purple umbrella. And we were in this village and mostly with the women. We had men there too, but mostly the women celebrating what they were able to do during COVID. And we want to go back to this village with water technologies. Next slide. Well, we have another problem that goes with climate change. Climate change is leading to shorter growing seasons. There's water lacking for plants in the dry season. There's malnutrition. India probably has the largest number of malnourished people in the entire world. Lack of vegetables, especially in dry seasons. Elderly people can no longer work in the fields. Puddles around homes breed mosquitoes, leading to malaria. And the economic payoff for working in the fields is unsustainable. Next slide. So this was a technology, very simple technology, that basically made it possible for people to grow food all year round, even in the dry season. You've got a puddle near your house, it's breeding mosquitoes. You're going to turn that puddle into a strength by building something called permagardens, which is a family and household-based version of permaculture. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so what you do, you find out where the puddle is. Whoops, stop there, stop. The the idea is that you take an area 4 meters by 4 meters. You can do up to 10 meters by 10 meters, but you can do a lot even in 4 meters, right next to your house. You find a puddle. You dig up the soil, you dig up all the topsoil, and then you dig up 18 inches further into the subsoil, and you mix that all heavily with compost. Then you build channels under the earth, where you dug out, channels that'll store the water. Then you pile everything back on top, leaving the hole where your original puddle was to siphon the water under the earth, so that you will have essentially an underground water tank underneath your garden. Next slide. So that's what it's going to look like. You're going to store the water under the earth, and you'll have vegetables all year round, even in the dry season. Oh, the technology, very important. You need one piece of very important, highly evolved technology for this job. It's called a shovel. That's all you need to feed people. Next slide. Next. That's what a finished permagarden will look like. This one, yeah. So we had a school teacher, very poor school teacher in a very dry area of Kenya. He was sent to this school. It was a great drought. He had 300 families. They were all hungry, really hungry. We trained them, and then each family trained the next ones. And in 1 year, the cost of food per family declined by 45. He's a little bit of a scientist. He kept good data for us. Declined by 45%. And hunger at the school impacted 95% of the children, entirely eliminated just through permagardens, shovels. And some of the saved funds went into building a rainwater catchment, and he's planting fruit trees around all of the permagardens. Next slide. So we brought 3 of our groups together at our Kambiri Center in northern Kenya, from 3 different counties brought together. We wanted them all to meet each other because, again, they don't need, white North Americans teaching them this stuff. They can learn from each other. I asked, what is the right relationship between people in the global north who want to do good and our partners abroad? And the answer is empower them so they don't need us. And they were very proud to receive all their safety equipment. I'm not sure they're wearing them all the time, but nonetheless, they do have them. Next slide. The 3, you'll see there are 3 women in front. As I said, the 3 of the programs are headed by women, widows, actually, in these 3 sub-counties. Next slide. How do we evaluate success? Does the program help fulfill our mission? Is the program community-led and community-driven? And finally, are things sustainable? I see so many programs being started, but no maintenance and sustainability built into them. People are always coming to me from various parts of the world saying, we want to grow fruit trees. And I'm always saying, don't grow fruit trees, sustain the fruit trees. I've seen so many projects where people plant trees and then they don't take care of them. I have a funny story from Chipko days in the Alok River Basin, where the community had gone out to plant trees, and a wonderful hillside project to plant trees. Beside it, the government said, oh, okay, well, we should plant trees too. So they also put trees over the hillside right next to the community project. All of the government's trees died. So rather than figure out what had gone wrong, the government moved its sign from the government side So the community side, so they could say they had done the project. And I have photos of this. It's a very funny story. Are the program outputs and outcomes sustainable? Next slide. Solution. Next slide. Join us. So we have set up a committee in India, actually a steering committee of 4 social activists from different parts of India to be our steering committee for friendly water in India. Because there are all kinds of questions that frankly, we are not qualified to answer, but there are people in India who are. I'm hoping we're going to be launching our first major project. We've had some small projects in India before. We're hoping to launch our first major project with Bajaj and Gautam people in Madhya Pradesh. I'm hoping later this year, we will just see how that goes. Yes, I see the note. If anyone wishes to sign up for our email list, we send out updates like every 2 weeks, and I will put my email in the chat. But that's who we are, and I thank you so much for your efforts, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much. It was really good. And you begin with a sentence which invokes the calling of constructive program of Mahatma Gandhi. Think globally and act locally.
No, I said the opposite. Think locally, act globally.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Think globally and act locally. And that is the calling of Swadeshi. Swadeshi is not about an idea of imposing Indian. It is appropriate technology. It is something which is very local. So all of your initiative, it's something which talks about appropriate technology. And that is the path of liberation, of economic subjugation. That is the path of decentralization. That is the path of, decentralizing justice also. So it was really very enriching and very deep initiative. And thank you so much for your sadhana. And we think about, Gandhi in Indian context, but with your initiative, with your work, we can think this is a kind of global phenomena, a phenomena which path the success, a phenomena which guides us. So it was a really very enriching session. So we will begin with some of our discussions, question query. So I would like to invite Professor Gyan Gului, who is a deep seeker of Gandhian thought and deep economist from Italy, to initiate discussion. Yes, Gyan, over to you.
It was very interesting. I would like to have a question which is not directly connected to the PowerPoint. That is, I analyzed a little bit in the past the question of water and of the effects of the privatization of the water system in some countries in Europe. I do not know how the situation is in Asia or specifically in India, but in Europe, there was a huge discussion. In some countries, there was a privatization. In Italy, for instance, there was a discussion, but the privatization did not come about. Anyway, there are very many studies, for instance, the studies of Maud Barlow, which testifies to the worsening of the water deliverance in case of privatization. That is, there have been huge problems in many countries. And well, I am not an expert on it, but I would like to ask the question what you think about this program, because I think that the debate will go on, and not only in Europe, but also in other countries. And I'm deeply interested in it, because I think it is a high point in the question of water. And the question also of how we define water, because, for instance, Barlow, but not only she, points out that the question is, how do we define water? Is water something to which we have a right? Because in this sense, of course, if we have a right, the country, the state, the government have duties in order to deliver water, in order to provide water. But if, for instance, water is defined with a little shift in the definition, only a need, which we have, then it is no longer a right. And in this case, the government can say, well, it's not a question for me, it's not a matter for me, it's your own affair. And this is what happened precisely in some countries of Europe. That is, the government has said, no, it's only a need, it's not a right, therefore I have no responsibility towards the citizens in order to deliver them water, or in order to deal with the problem of water. It is a problem of private sectors, of the consumers, and to the firms which deal with water provision. And this is a huge problem. It seems that to define water as need or as a right has no relevance, but, well, it is an earthquake to the right definition. And I think we have to pay attention anyway to the definition of water in relation to the citizens of a country. Thank you very much. Anyway, it was really very, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
A brief comment. It's really beyond my area of expertise, except to say, as a Gandhian, I don't talk about rights much. I talk about responsibilities. I think rights are an important mythology. Every right that we claim had to be fought for, and has to be refought for again and again and again. The real question is, what responsibilities do we have to each other as human beings? And I would like to see much more conversation about responsibilities. Rights are a useful language. I understand its uses, but in the long run, and as a Gandhian, I'd have to say, we need much more consideration of what kind of responsibility do we ultimately have for each other.
Thank you so much. I request Professor Meera Chakravarti, madam, to share her reflections.
Thank you, Randhir. David, I think Randhir raised one good point saying about decentralization. We in India, we have these reservations for women in Panchayat, and they have fairly done, quite a good work in this. But what I would like to say is that there is this contentious relationship between political parties and people. And therefore, the responsibility for undertaking proper development is not there. It is there in written documents, but it is never implemented. Women are never taken into consideration, never taken into account while planning either the sources of water or preservation, water harvesting, or what, because when we, as a member of Women's Commission, we went visit, they were telling us that please remove the wear shop, Tory shop. The Tory shop is there, and that is spoiling the whole thing. So you take the responsibility of removing those shops. So once that is removed, we will have schools. They were saying they will have schools and good roads. And so therefore, this is not taken into consideration by the political parties. That there is a reconstructive approach from the women is not understood by the so-called responsible political parties. You talked about the technology. There have been some people who have tried to put the wheels under the water drums so that women can push the drums to the water sources, so they need not carry the whole thing, the jug on their head. So I think these kinds of things, much earlier the IITs had done that. That the bullock carts were, were earlier had terrible the wooden wheels, which was so much rigorously the bullocks, not only the bullocks suffered, even the people. So the IITs planned a tire, which is of course the rubber tire, and which would smoothly push. So these kinds of things which should come from the rural base. You can't just have a urban planning designs for the rural. No, it has to be from the rural source. That so the women should be those who are in governance must be taken into account. Thank you. Thank you, Randhir.
Thank you. I request David Albert sir to note on these queries, and I will invite you at the end of the session to share your remarks. Yes, I request Miniti Pradhanji to also share her queries or interactions.
Hello, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. I would like to thank you for the invitation and for being, I'm able to listen such a deep and insightful presentation about water. So I have just a little reflection about that. What I understood from the PowerPoint presentation, that the physical scarcity, like from local ecology, has converted into the economic scarcity. What was coming to my mind was, like in the recent war in Ukraine, it has destroyed and damaged many critical infrastructure. There also everybody needs a safe water problem also is coming. And as now Meera ma'am was mentioning, like that as well as in the city, as well as in the rural area, everywhere there is water crisis. If you take water crisis in Chennai in 2019, it was horrible. Like that, my query is whether the solutions like rainwater collection, that coastal reservoirs, desalination, irrigation technique, whether it will work in rural areas and as well as, and why it is not working in the urban areas. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Miniti Pradhanji. And I request respected participant to raise his or her hand. Meanwhile, we can invite MD Chandar Sahab, who is a Gandhian activist and nurturer at Gandhi Peace Foundation, Chennai.
Hello, good evening to all. Thank you to Professor David. He has given a very good solution, self-sufficient and sustainable. But I would like to add one thing. Actually, I was involved in the development of the deep well, India must to deep well hand pump. Must be, Professor must be very much aware of it. I was working in a company, Richardson and Cruders, UNICEF, during the 1970 to 80 water decade. We only developed the deep well hand pump, and UNICEF became a key partner in association with us in design development, and we have supplied almost to all the African countries. The one thing I want to ask is, whatever Professor said is, wherever there is a water table is so low, it is going to 300, 400, we are using this pump. Of course, this is still being done, I believe, in African countries, and we have associated with another social activist that's also he must be aware, WSWAP, that heater coming. she is doing a lot of hand pump erection by association with the Mississippi State University Mechanical Engineering Department. They are installing these people hand pumps where the water table is low, so they cannot do anything. This kind of rainwater, of course, rainwater saving they can do, but still the water table is so low. These pumps helps us. Hitar Coming is she's also doing this Gandhian activity. She's having a Ahimsa library. She's working at Zimbabwe and Sierra Leone. So she came to India once. She associated with our Gandhian Peace Foundation, and we went to schools and propagate how to save water, the essentiality of water. Because in India we waste water, liberally we waste water, but it cannot be done in Africa. So she has done a very good program for school students. That's what I want to add. So kind of you. Thank you so much. Yes, Professor.
So I just returned from meeting with representatives of what's called the Kingdom of Buganda. It's a cultural organization, but they once had a king and they still nominally have a king. And I met with the Minister of Water. And over the last 3 or 4 years, they built 700 plus wells and boreholes. All 700 of them are failing. They repaired 300 of them. They'll be okay for 2 to 3 years. And then the scientists went and tested the water and they found that it's all contaminated. They can't use any of the water. I understand the need for boreholes. I also understand that I have hundreds of pictures of failed boreholes on my computer. I didn't share them with you, but I have them. Have to look for other solutions. More boreholes built in a small area means that people are simply stealing water from each other. We've seen that everywhere. But hearing about, again, they spent between $4 and $7 million building these boreholes using the best technology they could find, and they're all failing. And we're finding this throughout Africa. I won't speak to India on this question because I don't know, but they're failing virtually everywhere. There's got to be other solutions to this. But the main problem is not technology. I want to stress that. As again, I showed you what I could do with a shovel. The main problem is the organization of people that does not rely on their government, that does not rely on the private sector, does not rely on big corporations, does not rely on cities. We're Gandhians. Gandhi never used the word sustainable development. Sustainable development is a lie. All of the sustainable development goals are failing. And if you took China out of the picture, they're failing even more. The things I am seeing in India, virtually everywhere, are worse than they were 40 years ago among rural poor people, significantly worse than they were. There's more hunger than I saw 40 years ago. There's less water than there was 40 years ago. People are working longer hours. Agriculture is failing. There are floods. There are droughts. You go on and on and on. Stop talking about sustainable development. It's a lie. Start talking about what do people need in their communities to unite with each other to make for Gram Swaraj.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Very kind of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Gandhi talks about village republic. And that is something which is a calling. Because, it is, there are many Gandhians who oppose the idea of sustainable development in the name of it is a colonization of American model. It is something which is also, understood, particularly when we see environmental movement. We see how local technology and local consciousness, which nurture the very quest of development. And even in Rajasthan, where we find, how local indigenous knowledge system, they protected their spaces without any intervention and education. But, since with the advent of this modernization and education system, we are missing the life skill part of thing, So today's even I belong to village, but I don't know the mode of life of village. I don't know how to produce. So, but that is not important in today's education system, and that is the crisis of this civilization. And with your initiative, with your insight, and that is why Gandhi was also advocating the idea of Gram Swaraj and constructive programs where village is a center. And and something which are very insightful in, I did not tell in the beginning, David has also written, edited many books, I think more than 15 books on non-violence theory and practice, community-based education, public health. And he also wrote one book called Applying Non-Violence Theory. So without naming Gandhi, action actually is. And what line Gandhi always tells, that God made the village and man made the city. So all this destruction made by human, that is, we have to again nurture our natural thing. So thank you so much. It was a very, very deep presentation. And I would request Dr. Suresh Rohilla ji to share his reflections on your presentation, being a chair of today's session. Sir, over to you.
Thank you for the interesting presentation and insights. Also pick up a few things from the presentation as well as from the questions. There was a question asking that solutions would work in rural areas, in urban areas, or what is the guidance? I would say that the world at the moment, at present, is much more complex, and the mosaic what we see is different from when Gandhi had told. But however, I think there is a wisdom in all those actions which are there, and I think wherever possible, the actions should be taken that human settlements. I would say neither rural or neither urban. It is human settlements, and when we have a human angle to that, we should try in the design and planning of settlements. What has happened is over a period of time, post-independence, India has institutionalized water management. So with institutionalization, state has taken control, and it is more regulated and controlled development of water resources, and role of individuals has been reduced to just subscribers, I would say. So I think the message which I would like to say as a chair from the learnings from David is that water is everybody's business. In today's language, people understand this term business. So everybody is connected to water, and one should understand the value of each drop of water. So many of the issues which are connected in the irresponsible and mindless use of water in urban areas is because people don't understand the value of water. And they know that there is a mindless technology of flushing toilets, and people know that, 50 to 60% of water from the catchment area is being brought to cities from rural areas to only flush the toilet. And nobody is going to question them for this mindless utilization of, vast resources. And this whole imbalance in human settlement development is part of the urban design and planning, the way it is seen. Certainly, the lecture provided a lot of insights. And I would also like to comment on that technology is not just to make it high-tech, AI and sensors and membranes. Technology is also that it could be simple, and it should be acceptable and adaptable by the communities who can operate and maintain. I think that came out very clearly from David that, there are a lot of instances and there are a lot of case studies which provide us guidance that we could really say that there is a lot of takeaways from today's presentation, I would say. And at last, I would say that, we should make informed decisions. Certainly, we live in much more complex world. We need to sensitize these regulators, operators, and managers who are today told to be the custodians of the water, that they are not the only one. And for example, also water is constrained to the fact that it is being designed by only mechanical engineers and civil engineers. We should also say that, there are hydrologists, geologists, and there are other disciplines that they should be taken in consultation, when they design any solutions. I was listening to Professor Chandra's, comment. I would say that there is a need for industry also, technology also, but it need not be always a membrane, decentralization and top high-end industry. It could be the basic grassroots solution which can provide access to services. And I know David doesn't like the word sustainable development, but for something which can be affordable and which can make services possible or access to water and sanitation to all. I think that is a key takeaway, Randhir, I would say. And I was so delighted to be part of this dialogue. I learned a lot personally, and I would like to thank you for inviting me here. And I hope I was able to do justice with whatever.
Thank you.
I was trying to do.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And you beautifully, remarked the insights or the learnings from David. And we all know that water is the only natural resource for which there is no substitute. And we call in Hindi Jal Hi Jeevan. No life can exist without it. And this is also in this year, the World Water Day. The theme of World Water Day is what water means to. And that is something very, very important. And that invites us to engage with the deep question of development with environment. And that is why we are looking for ecology as a economy of permanence. And Gandhi, appropriate technology and all. So thank you so much. And it was a very enriching session. Thank you so much, David Albert, for giving us the time and for inspiring us with your work. Thank you, Dr. Suresh Rohilla, for accepting our invitation. And I am very grateful to Professor Vibhuti Patel, Madam, who is our mentor and who always inspires with her work. Professor Meera Chakrabarti, Professor Gyan Guloi, Professor Mohanty, Muniti Pradhanji, M. Chandraji, Anup Misraji, Rajendra Singh ji joined for some time, Ajit Sahadreji, and all the students who are watching this from Facebook page. Thank you so much for your kind invitation or your participation. Thank you so much. We look forward for your kind participation, engagement with our GSDS forum weekly time. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you.